Kara is a clinical psychology PhD student at the University of New Mexico. Her research interests include person-centered, individualized approaches to recovery, community-engaged research, reducing substance-related stigma, and the intersection of chronic pain and substance use. Kara has been a Phoenix member since 2019. And Kara, I will pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see that okay? Awesome. Okay, so thanks for that intro, Katie. As Katie mentioned, my name's Kara. I'm currently a PhD student at University of New Mexico, and I've been working alongside Beth and Katie with the research team here at the Phoenix for the last couple of years. So I'm really excited to share a project that we've been working on together, which we've titled Stories from the Desert, a qualitative my Zoom screen's in the way. There we go. A qualitative study of the Phoenix Moab retreat using photo voice methodology. So that's a super long title, and I hope some of those terms will make some more sense here in the next couple minutes. I'm sure that most people on this call are familiar with Moab and what it entails, but just to give a really brief overview, when we say Moab retreat, we are referring to the annual retreat held in Moab, which is a town in southeastern Utah. And if anyone has been there, you're aware that Moab is really known for its landscape, its access to outdoor nature, which is captured here in this photo on the right. And here at the Moab retreat, it's focused really on outdoor activities. So some of those are listed here in that third bullet point. That includes hiking, biking, paddleboarding, yoga, etc. And then, of course, really connection and community building as a whole, and what that's at the core of the Phoenix as a whole. And so I believe the Moab retreat has been running for coming up on 2 decades. And we've heard from folks, right? Like, Moab was awesome. Can't wait to go next year. It had such a great impact on me. So we know anecdotally that this trip is having an impact and it's meaningful. But here we kind of wanted to take a step back and look at that more systematically and dive in exactly what folks are experiencing at the Moab retreat and what that means to them. And so to do that, we used what's termed a qualitative approach. And so when we think research, we might picture numerical data, trends, statistics, and that would all fall into the bucket of what is called quantitative analysis. Here we're using what we call qualitative analysis. So this is when we're really dealing with non-numerical data that might come from an interview or an observation we're making, and it really gives us this rich data that we can dive into. And so here we used a specific methodology that's defined here in that second bullet point, known as photo voice. And photo voice is a unique method where we can combine both photography and storytelling to really allow people with lived experience of a given condition or circumstance to share their own stories and perspectives on a given issue. So here we used photo voice to further explore the experiences of those who attended Moab in 2024. And this next slide is kind of a zoomed out overview of exactly what steps we took and what our method was. And there are a lot of fine-grained details that aren't included here. So always happy to answer questions at the end or offline. But just to give a brief overview, there on the left, the first step we took, we reached out to everyone who attended Moab in 2024, and we invited folks to submit up to 5 photos that they took at the trip that they felt were meaningful or impactful to them, along with a detailed photo caption describing what was going on in that photo and why it was meaningful to them. We then invited folks to come to group discussions and kind of further dive into what those photos meant to them and what was displayed in those photos. And so here, really inviting folks to, comment and reflect on other participants' submissions and say, hey, that really resonates with me, or I experienced something similar, really with a goal of creating this common narrative around the Moab retreat and exactly what was taking place. And so what we did was we audio recorded those group discussions. Those were then transcribed, and we then used those for that third step. And this is where that qualitative analysis piece comes in. So we used what's called thematic analysis, essentially going through those transcriptions of those discussions, as well as those original photo captions that were submitted by folks. And Katie and I did some, line by line analysis, looking for different concepts and themes that were emerging within those. And ultimately, what we came up with on that far right is 5 overarching themes containing 24 codes. And when I say code, I'm really referring to a specific concept or construct that was coming up as we were looking through these transcripts. So, an example could be leadership or support. And that'll become a little more clear as we go through these next slides. These next handful of slides are going to display those themes as well as those codes, and they'll follow a similar pattern. So at the top of the slide, you'll see in red, that's the overarching theme. And then all of those bolded terms, those are those individual codes. And for the sake of time, I'm going to move somewhat quickly through these. But this first theme that we identified, we termed community and social networks. And so that sense of support for folks was significant and important, especially when you're coming out to the desert with strangers and taking on new challenges. A lot of folks commented on that sense of support from both volunteers and other members. Folks described a sense of belonging. So I like this quote. This person says, "My partner and I can both show up and find a place that we are allowed to be ourselves." And similarly, that idea of diversity and inclusion, which this person notes, is prevalent in Phoenix events in general, but also here at Moab as well. Also within the same theme, we noted a code of teamwork. I think this is really well captured in that photo there on the right. So of the 3 bicyclists biking up a climb together with the mountains in the back. And I should have mentioned that all the photos on these slides were submitted by participants as part of this project. So these are all participant photos. We also noted a sense of connection, and I think this was our most commonly endorsed code in the project. This quote came up a lot in our discussions. It's one of our favorites. So this person notes, "I found it was amazing how there were 12 of us packed into a van. In the beginning, we were all kind of nervous and we didn't know each other. And by the end, we were best friends." And then also this sense of leadership, which I think is well captured in that photo on the right, where we have one member teaching the others how to create a campfire for that night. This next theme we identified was embracing new experiences. So again, for a lot of folks coming to Moab, they're trying new activities and taking on new challenges for the first time. And so with that comes that sense of adventure, also a sense of accomplishment and excitement. And then here at the bottom is that code of novel experiences. So this person noting the Moab retreat was the first time that they ever top roped outside. Again, we also noted that facing fears. I think a lot of times this came up as a fear of heights for folks that were climbing for the first time, understandably. This person noted that in the example quote, they were absolutely terrified of heights, but really seeing other team members, volunteers, and staff members coming together to support one another helped her to make it to the top. And then this next code here was fun, which I really like that we identified this. I think maybe when we're thinking of substance use or addiction or even recovery, sometimes maybe the first thing that comes to mind isn't necessarily fun, but this showing that there is space for fun in recovery and how that shows up specifically in this context. Also in this theme, we identified nature. I think this one kind of speaks for itself just due to the natural landscape of Moab with the mountains and the red rocks. And then tying into the same code of nature was awe. And so when we think of awe, we're really thinking of this emotional response to something that is extraordinary or vast. And this might spark a sense of wonder or admiration. And so this person is noting, I think they're on a hike and they're in a cave, and you come out and you see the awe and wonder of the landscape that Moab offers. And then this last code here, we use the term special because this specific word was used by participants a handful of times. This person in this quote saying, "It felt very special. I've never really been a part of anything on that kind of scale in the recovery space." This next theme we identified was emotional well-being. This sense of gratitude was a common code for us that we noted. I really like this quote, so I'll go ahead and read it. I look at that and I get the sense of gratitude because I get to go to places like that. I get really emotional because I did not start out my adult life this way. I didn't give myself any opportunities to do stuff like this. It was always, where's the next drink or the next drug? This sense of anxiety was prevalent at Moab, and we ended up describing this as really this anticipatory anxiety. So, again, that sense of unknown and discomfort of not knowing what to expect, who's going to be there, what activities are going to take place. And so, really, in a lot of these quotes, we notice this acknowledgement of the anxiety and also leaving space for that and engaging in the Moab events despite the presence of anxiety. And then on the other side, also noting a couple folks describe this sense of peace and feeling grounded, specifically during the morning yoga that's offered. We also noted the sense of reflection. So this occurred both at Moab during the events, and then some folks also noted carrying this practice of reflection into their day-to-day back home. This example quote, this person's describing a specific spot in Moab where they're able to sit after a day of activities and just reflect on the day and be with nature. And then also within this theme, we identified a code of psychological safety. I know this has been really key in the Phoenix research team and in the logic model as a whole for the Phoenix. And when we say psychological safety, really referring to the ability to show up authentically or take risks and be oneself, show up authentically as oneself without fear of negative judgment or consequences. And so this person noting that they were able to step out of their comfort zone in a lot of the social aspects at Moab. Just a couple more themes here. I know there's a lot in here. This one we titled personal growth. So a sense of identity, feeling comfortable to be oneself. So kind of similar to psychological safety. And then recovery. So I'll briefly touch on this at the end. Recovery wasn't necessarily as common of a code as some of the others that we've talked about, which I'll expand on in a bit. But this person did explicitly refer to their own recovery. I'll also go ahead and read this quote really quick because it's pretty powerful. And it was submitted with this photo here on the right. This person says, at some point during the last couple of years, I stopped wondering whether I would be able to live the kind of life I want to live. The safety and security of recovery snuck up on me. I've stopped feeling afraid of myself or worried that I would ruin my life. It was so gradual that I didn't notice it until it was already all around me. The sense that life is worth living and that it was something precious I wanted to hold on to. Our last theme here was lasting impacts. I think this first example quote is a great example of that. So this person climbed for the first time down in Moab, and then they went home to their community in Boise, Idaho, and they're now leading a climbing group themselves. And then similarly, empowerment. So this person describing that they felt empowered at the Moab retreat, and that gave them the power to become a better leader in their home community. Zooming out really quick, just to give you an idea of how often these codes were endorsed. So you can see there on the left-hand side, the connection was by far the most common, endorsed 27 times, followed by support, which both fell into that community and social network theme. And I'll keep us moving just for time. Just some overarching conclusions, noting the value of this peer-supported and adventure-based experience and the impacts that it had in all of those themes we just identified, so empowerment and belonging and various forms of growth. I think we also wanted to highlight that, yes, this project was obviously specific to the Moab retreat. And in a lot of our participant quotes, we noted folks describing these same codes and themes as they relate to Phoenix events in general. So this person is noting, one of my favorite parts is how supportive everybody is, which is the case for most Phoenix events, but it almost feels amplified in Moab. I touched on this a bit earlier, but recovery was not the most frequent code that we mentioned. And so we kind of had a conversation about this as a team and what we might make of that. And I think it really leaves space for, yes, recovery is an important topic here. And this is all kind of surrounding this discussion around recovery. And that's what's bringing us together. And what are the other elements here outside of, substance use, or even maybe more clinical definitions of recovery that are really focused on the absence of substance use or reduction of substance use, and moving into other spaces and what constitutes recovery, for example, empowerment or sense of identity. And then this last note here, and I think this was an important one for this project in specific, this was obviously a very person-centered and participant-driven project in that their photos and their voices really drove the project. And we wanted them to be involved not only in the data collection process, but also what we would call the dissemination process. So how do we share this out? And so we actually asked participants in those group discussions, how might you want to see these findings shared out? And so this is a list of what participants came up with of how we might be able to share this out. I've highlighted what we've actually started so far. So we are working on a publication. We've had Phoenix staff help us out to create some short videos and animations. And then this last one is one that I know our research team is really excited about. So we've been working on, we're almost ready to print a physical photo book containing all of these submissions and photos. And I have a quick, this is like a 20-second screen grab. I just press play. So this will flip through and kind of give you an idea of what we've created here. So we've put together participants' photos along with their quotes. And we're really excited to be able to share this back out with everyone who participated and staff and volunteers. And those are all the slides I have. I know we're a little tight on time, so I'll go ahead and pause there and open it up to Jackie.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. That was excellent. You did a great job summarizing a lot of information in a really short time. And so, yeah, Jackie, we'll kick it over to you for the questions and answers.
Awesome. First, I just want to say, Kara, like that is just beautiful. And I'm really excited about the work that you did. Katie, would you leave that image up that you just had just so that we have it in the background? Because I just think that it keeps us kind of centered on yes, exactly what we're talking about. Kara, I have so many questions. I think the first thing is, you came at this both as a member and a researcher. And I think those of us who do have and bring kind of our personal experience into research, historically we're taught that you kind of have to separate things out. But I think in projects like this and sort of an evolution of where research is going, we're realizing that actually our personal experiences are super important in helping to understand. And I think it's evident in the project that you were really pulling in the voice of the people who've experienced this, who experienced Moab and had something to share. And not only did you not just translate what they said, but you actually are allowing their voice to be heard and seen in the pages of the pictures and the quotes that are there. I think that's just super unique. You don't see this a lot out in the research industry. I'm curious from your perspective, like, did you know that you were challenging kind of the norms in the research world when you started doing this project? Is that something that excites you or that you're drawn to? Or was it just something that happened and now you might be thinking, whoa, we need more of this?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many directions I could go with what you just shared. I think to answer your last question, yes, I definitely knew as we were going through this that in many ways this challenges that norm of, and I think in my work at the University of New Mexico, we've had these conversations a lot in the recovery world, specifically in recovery related research of who's the expert. Is it the scientist who's wearing the research hat, or is it the person with lived experience? And I think something we've talked about recently is each person shares their own definition of expertise. And I think allowing the voices of the people with lived experience to really guide the data collection and also how we share it back out. So keeping them engaged at all stages of the project is something I'm really interested in and want to continue to grow in. But also, leveraging the expertise, although it might look different, of the researcher. Of my mentor made a comment recently of like, we're doing a community engaged project right now, and she didn't throw the data at the group and say, analyze this and come back to me, right? So we're all working together and using our expertise in our own ways and to make this a reality. But really, I think dropping those biases and starting from the ground up and using more of an inductive process, and letting the data kind of speak for itself is kind of the approach we use here, and absolutely not the norm, but I do think that it's becoming more and more normalized, specifically in the recovery research space.
And I know we're really short on time, but I'm curious if there was anything that really surprised you in the research.
I think the first thing that we talked about that was a surprise was, just as I kind of already mentioned, that substance use specifically, and even just the term recovery, wasn't, the main topic of conversation. I think that was the main piece that surprised me. I'm going back to the codes really quick to see if something else stands out to me.
I'm wondering, why do you think that was? What do you think that was so different or unique about this event or this experience that recovery kind of took a back seat?
Yeah, I think really the nature of the retreat, and we heard from members, especially that idea of that anxiety and unknown. You really kind of have to throw yourself in there, right, and say, I'm going to do this. And I know a couple of years ago when we were looking at data of members who attended Moab, I think in 2023, one specific member stood out to me, and we've talked about this person's experience of that was their first ever Phoenix event, and they really just threw themselves in it and kind of embraced that unknown and uncertainty. And at that point, you're really leaning on that community support and social networks. And I think that almost becomes amplified, as some of the members said in those quotes, of really just leaning on the people that are there and kind of just going for it. And so those, again, those themes of connection and kind of facing fears and empowerment really stand out in this specific context, I think.
I'm wondering, as we kind of come to at least the close of my questions, if there's anything that you kind of took away from this that you want to elevate for individuals who might be going to Moab. And then the other one I would love to hear from you on is what you wish that other people working in the recovery space might learn from this.
Two really great questions. Again, I think for folks headed to Moab in the future, that anxiety piece really does speak to us, because we heard that a lot. Of most folks did experience some level of uncertainty of not knowing if really this was for them, or if they were going to enjoy this, or could even do it. There was a lot of doubt and anxiety there. And so I think people being willing to share vulnerably those experiences in this project was really meaningful, and it really showed that that's a common experience, and they're still experience this lasting impact from the Moab trip regardless. So kind of just normalizing that and knowing that might be present. And then for people in the recovery research space, I think it goes back to kind of what we were just getting at in the beginning, of that the need to kind of drop those biases, and maybe try something new. And there's a range, and there's a continuum of community engagement in research. And I think that something I have to understand for myself is that if you kind of want to dip your toes in this kind of research, you don't maybe need to go to the far end of that spectrum and conduct a completely community engaged project, which is actually extremely hard to do. So maybe just trying to start with small elements, like an advisory board of people with lived experience where you can seek feedback. That's something that we incorporated. Is we brought these themes and codes back to the participants themselves to seek feedback. And so that, I believe the term is member checking, in research. That's one little element that can be applied. And so I think just starting small.
Thank you, Kara. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. Are there any questions out there before we jump? I know we're already at time, but I'm curious if there's anybody else who has anything they want to ask. Feel free to come off mute. All right. Well, thank you, Kara. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to more conversations in the future and more research and having you being part of the team. It's just been awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks,
to
Kara.
all.
It was awesome.
And thank you, Kara. It was great. Thank you.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.